Every politician promises batteries will end the fossil fuel era, but the math never adds up. Today, nearly all the world's lithium and cobalt flow through China and Congo, where staggering choke points, price spikes, and ethical scandals threaten the world's energy transition. To keep the lights on, we need 850 times more storage than exists, but the metals, factories, and time have simply run out. What happens when the limits no one planned for collide with the future everyone's been promised? Lithium sits at the heart of every modern battery, but the world's supply chain runs through a narrow funnel. Nearly 70% of all lithium refining is controlled by China, giving one country enormous leverage over the entire energy storage industry. Raw lithium may be dug from Australian mines or pumped from the brine pools of South America, but almost every ton is shipped to Chinese chemical plants before it ever reaches a battery cell. Australia, the largest miner, is already running at full tilt. Opening a new mine there is not a matter of months. It is 7 to 10 years of environmental reviews, engineering studies, and government permits before a single rock is moved. In Chile's Atacama Desert, where the world's biggest brine operations sprawl across the salt flats, each new well can take up to 2 years to permit and drill. Operations managers log 12-hour shifts, balancing production targets with a relentless drought. Extracting 1 ton of lithium from the Atacama can consume 500,000 gallons of water, draining aquifers that local communities depend on. Indigenous groups have staged roadblocks protesting as livestock die and water tables fall. Argentina holds vast reserves, but the Lithium Triangle's promise is stalled by missing infrastructure. Port officials track shipments delayed for weeks, waiting on rail lines and customs clearances that never seem to arrive. In Nevada, Portugal, and Serbia, proposed mines remain frozen by lawsuits and environmental pushback. Global production stands at about 130,000 tons a year. To meet net zero pledges, the world needs 2 million tons annually by 2030, a 15-fold jump in just 6 years. Every expansion faces a wall of red tape, water scarcity, and local opposition. The gap between what is promised and what is possible is growing wider by the day, and every battery factory, power project, and electric vehicle depends on a supply chain that cannot keep up. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, cobalt is dug from the earth by hand, often with little more than shovels and sacks. This single country supplies around 70% of the world's cobalt, a metal essential for stabilizing the chemistry inside most modern batteries. But the supply chain is fragile in ways few people realize. Roughly a fifth of Congo's cobalt comes from artisanal mines, small informal pits where entire families work side by side, including children as young as 7. When international watchdogs document child labor or deadly accidents, those mines are shut down overnight. The world's battery makers are left scrambling to find replacements, and the consequences ripple across the globe. In early 2024, the Congolese government imposed a sweeping export ban on unprocessed cobalt. Prices, which had slumped to multi-year lows just months before, spiked by 60% in a matter of weeks. Cobalt hydroxide, the raw form shipped to refineries, saw even sharper jumps, up to 400% from its lowest point. Refiners in China and Europe rushed to secure whatever material they could, but many found themselves cut off. Battery manufacturers, already struggling to meet surging demand, were forced to redesign products and hunt for alternative chemistries. The sudden movement in prices reshaped global supply chains. Major mining companies like Glencore and China Molybdenum control most of what is called the ethical supply, but even their output is subject to quotas and political risk. An investigator described the reality on the ground. One day the children are digging, the next day the mine is closed. The world's supply can vanish in a moment. This is not just a humanitarian crisis, it is a supply chain on a knife's edge. As cobalt prices swing wildly, every battery factory, car maker, and grid project faces the threat that tomorrow's supply might simply evaporate. Nickel, the final piece in the battery mineral puzzle, faces a crisis engineered by policy as much as geology. In January 2020, Indonesia, the world's largest nickel producer, imposed a sweeping ban on raw nickel ore exports. The official line from Jakarta was clear: no more shipping out cheap ore for foreign profit. Instead, mining companies were told to build high-pressure acid leach plants, massive complex facilities that turn low-grade laterite into battery-grade nickel. Each plant costs at least $3 billion and takes 5 years to build if everything goes smoothly. Processing contracts were rewritten overnight, with global battery makers like LG and CATL forced to invest directly in Indonesian smelters or risk losing access altogether. Trade analysts warned that the sudden choke on raw ore would ripple through the entire supply chain. The world's battery factories rely on Class 1 nickel, the high-purity form needed for energy-dense cells. But these new Indonesian plants can barely keep up with demand, and construction delays are common. Meanwhile, Russia, which supplies about 10% of global nickel, saw its exports hit by international sanctions. The Philippines, once a fallback, has begun shutting down mines over environmental damage, further tightening the noose. Industry forecasts now predict a global shortage of Class 1 nickel by 2027 or 2028. This is not a distant problem. Electric vehicle makers and grid storage developers are already in a bidding war for the same limited supply. With every new gigafactory announcement, the pressure on nickel only grows. Policy documents from trade ministries and investment banks echo the same warning. Without a breakthrough in processing speed or a sudden glut of new mines, the battery revolution risks running aground on the rocks of mineral scarcity. The numbers are stark: billions invested, years lost to construction, and a deficit that no amount of political will can quickly erase. Inside the world's battery factories, the promises of rapid scale run up against the realities of the assembly line. Even with global manufacturing capacity now topping 1,200 gigawatt-hours per year, only a fraction ends up as grid-scale storage. 80% of all cells produced are already spoken for by electric vehicle makers, leaving the power sector to fight for what is left. A quality control manager at one of Asia's leading gigafactories reviews the day's production report. Nearly 1 out of every 5 battery cells failed to meet the plant's strict standards. That is a 15 to 20% rejection rate, a figure echoed across the industry from China to Europe. Each rejected cell represents wasted materials, lost time, and a direct hit to the bottom line. Even after a decade of experience, the factory's yield curves show that reaching world-class quality takes years, not months. New entrants face a 5 to 7 year learning curve before they can match the defect rates of established giants like CATL, LG, and Panasonic. The challenge is not just technical. Building a new gigafactory from scratch demands an investment of billions and a commitment to 3 to 5 years of construction and ramp up before full output is possible. Delays are common, with equipment shortages and regulatory hurdles stretching timelines even further. Meanwhile, demand for skilled labor is outpacing supply. Industry estimates show that 300,000 battery technicians will be needed globally by 2030, but training programs are struggling to keep up. Factory managers routinely work double shifts, recruiting from overseas just to keep production lines running. At the executive level, allocation decisions are relentless. With electric vehicle orders surging and automakers signing multi-year supply contracts, grid storage projects are often left waiting or forced to accept lower-grade cells. Executives admit off the record that even with nameplate capacity rising, the real bottleneck is reliable, high-quality output. Every delay, every rejected batch, every labor shortage compounds the gap between what is promised and what is delivered. The numbers tell the story. 1,200 gigawatt-hours a year on paper, but only a sliver is available for the grid. Ramping up capacity is a marathon, not a sprint. The world's storage ambitions are colliding with the hard math of factory floors, and the supply of battery cells remains as constrained as the minerals that feed them. Battery storage projects do not just face shortages in minerals or manufacturing. Even when a project is fully built, it can spend years waiting for permission to actually connect to the grid. Across the United States, the interconnection queue has become a choke point, stalling the transition to renewable energy. As of 2025, more than 1,200 gigawatts of clean energy and storage projects are stuck in limbo, over twice the country's total generating capacity. The median wait time for a new project to clear the queue has jumped from 2 years in 2020 to nearly 5 years today. Inside PJM, the nation's largest grid operator, the backlog is especially severe. Their latest report lists 271 gigawatts of projects waiting for study, enough to power most of the eastern United States. But PJM can process only about 10 to 12 gigawatts each year. An analyst in the planning office flips through a stack of system impact studies, each one hundreds of pages long. Projects are clustered together for review, but any change, like a single developer dropping out, forces the entire group back to the starting line. In 2024 alone, PJM reviewed 88 gigawatts of proposals, but approved just 2 gigawatts for interconnection. Most projects either withdraw or wait for years, burning through investment capital while their batteries sit idle. California's grid, managed by CAISO, faces a different kind of gridlock. The application queue ballooned to 140 gigawatts, with 20 gigawatts of battery storage alone. In 2023, CAISO stopped accepting new applications for several months, overwhelmed by the volume and complexity of hybrid projects pairing batteries with solar or wind. A senior planner describes the reality. Each storage project must be modeled not just as a generator, but as a load, stressing the grid in ways traditional plants never did. The average wait for storage approval in California now stretches to 5.5 years, and only about 10 to 15% of battery projects survive the process. The technical hurdles are only part of the problem. Connecting a new battery facility often triggers expensive grid upgrades, sometimes running into the hundreds of millions of dollars per project. Nationwide, the total cost of necessary grid upgrades is estimated at $2 trillion, with no clear funding source in sight. Local permitting battles add another 2 or 3 years to the timeline as residents and municipalities fight over land use and safety concerns. Utilities facing these obstacles approve only about 20% of storage applications. The rest are either withdrawn or left in indefinite limbo. As a result, gigawatt hours of batteries that could be storing renewable energy are left sitting idle, unable to deliver power when it is needed most. The disconnect between hardware and the grid is not a technical glitch. It is a structural barrier that threatens to stall the entire promise of battery-powered clean energy. Texas stands as the largest proving ground for grid-scale batteries in the United States. On paper, 5 gigawatts of battery storage are available to support the ERCOT grid, but in the peak of summer, when demand surges past 85 gigawatts, those batteries provide cover for just a fraction of the load. During the 2024 heat wave, batteries could only supply power for 4 hours at full output, a drop in the bucket when blackouts stretch for days. In the winter freeze that same year, batteries delivered less than 2% of the electricity Texans needed. The rest came from natural gas plants, which operators quietly admit must run 90% of the time to keep the lights on. Grid operators in California face their own test. The Moss Landing Battery Complex, one of the largest in the world, suffered a fire that knocked out 20% of the state's storage capacity overnight. Incident logs show a transformer fault triggered a chain reaction. Temperatures soared past 1,000 degrees Celsius. Firefighters spent hours battling the blaze with specialized foam, while grid controllers scrambled to reroute power. The outage rippled through the California ISO, forcing gas turbines to ramp up and exposing just how thin the margin for error has become. Australia offers another warning. The Victoria Big Battery, designed to back up the grid during emergencies, burned for 3 days in 2021. Water proved useless against the flames. Insurance claims soared, and regulators reclassified such facilities as high risk. Utility executives, speaking off the record, concede that batteries are nowhere near replacing fossil fuel plants for reliability. "We can't run the system on headlines," one confided in an archival interview. "When the pressure is on, we lean on gas." These incidents reveal the limits of current battery technology. 4 hours of backup is the ceiling, not the baseline. When batteries fail or run dry, the grid turns to gas. The promise of clean, round-the-clock power remains out of reach, not because of a lack of ambition, but because the numbers simply do not add up when stress hits the system. Communities living near lithium brine fields in Chile and Argentina count the cost of battery expansion in ways that rarely appear in investor presentations. In the Atacama, extracting a single ton of lithium can drain 500,000 gallons of water from desert aquifers, a resource that once fed crops and livestock for generations. Local protests have become routine, with roadblocks and court filings challenging the right of mining companies to pump water in a region that receives less than 1 millimeter of rain each year. The scale of extraction required for a grid-scale battery future is staggering. Global mining would need to increase by a factor of 100 to build enough storage for a fully renewable grid. That means more wells, more land stripped bare, and more communities facing depleted water tables. Promises of recycling offer little relief. Even with the latest technology, only about half of the lithium in old batteries can be recovered. The rest is lost, often as toxic waste. Most spent batteries end up in landfills or are exported for low-grade processing, creating a new wave of environmental hazards in countries ill-equipped to handle them. For every ton of lithium recycled, another ton must be mined to meet demand, an endless cycle of extraction and disposal. Water is not the only resource under strain. The environmental impact of mining for battery minerals stretches from the rainforests of Congo to the forests of Portugal. Mining a single electric vehicle battery requires moving 500,000 tons of earth, and grid-scale storage multiplies that demand by orders of magnitude. Industry analysts warn that the material footprint of battery storage could soon eclipse that of fossil fuel infrastructure, even as companies promote their green credentials. The truth is, mining at scale reshapes landscapes and livelihoods. Investors poured $400 billion into battery companies since 2020, chasing the promise of clean energy profits. 60% of battery startups are projected to fail by 2027. Northvolt filed for bankruptcy after burning through $15 billion. QuantumScape's stock has lost 90% of its value since its peak. Insurers, stung by fires at sites like Victoria and Moss Landing, are pulling back, raising premiums, or refusing coverage altogether. As project failures mount, the capital bubble that fueled the battery boom is beginning to burst, leaving communities and investors exposed to the fallout. Today, the gap between energy ambitions and what battery storage can deliver is widening, not closing. As global investment pours in and supply chains strain, The math remains unforgiving. Materials, economics, and physics set hard limits. The future of clean power now depends on facing these realities, not wishful thinking. The real energy crisis is not scarcity, but denial. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.